Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your host, Dave Wakeman. My guest today is, I believe, tied for the most appearances in Business of Fun podcast history, which is obviously super prestigious, not to be discounted. To be applauded, I'm going to have to get a jacket like SNL at some point, maybe. My buddy Martin Gammeltoft. And Martin comes on to talk about some new stuff he's up to. Lots and lots of new stuff. So it was great to catch up with Martin. Before we talk to Martin, though, let me remind you of a couple things. Martin will be in Intix. Starts on January 26th, I believe, in Las Vegas. So check out Martin. I am traveling somewhere else to a secret location, so I will not be in Las Vegas. So let Martin be my stand-in. So say hi to Martin. Anything nice you want to say about me, say it to Martin. Check out my website. It's davewakeman.com. You'll find my blog. You'll find the store. You'll find all kinds of stuff there. It's a great set of resources. And check out the Talking Tickets newsletter. That's at talkingtickets.substack.com. You can also get it in the pop-up on the Dave Wakeman website, but either way, you don't want to miss it. And join our Slack channel. The link to that is in the show notes because I will definitely never hazard to give you the entire URL. I don't think it's possible for me to do such a thing. Much too complicated. So back to Martin. So Martin comes on to talk about some work he's doing with Culture Suite, which is a whole new area that we haven't talked about with him before. We talk about Radiohead because Martin had just come back from Radiohead. We talk about building websites. We talk about how to think through your website, kind of adaptability and flexibility of websites, the constraints of websites. We talk a lot about websites. We talk about, how your website can meet your needs and how your website as an arts or sports or cultural organization can keep up with the websites that people are used to in their other parts of their lives. So this is like a really cool tool. Martin's, of course, a buddy of mine, so that's also always really cool. So here I am talking to Martin once more, number 6 time. All right. I want to welcome back. I think you're the first 6-timer on the Business of Fun. Is that right?
If it is, I'm very proud to be.
Yeah, I'm going to say that if you probably have been on the most, and if not, you're tied with Eric Fuller.
I think I listened to the recent episode with Eric, and I think you said 6th time, and I was like, that must be a tie.
Yeah, that must be a tie. Well, but it makes sense because and so this is Martin Gammeltoft. So Martin, hello everybody. It was just funny because you two are probably the most likely that you'll see me out with at like ticket events and conferences or like just in general. It's like wherever we are in the world, we will get together. And that you and Eric. So it's funny that makes sense.
I will seek you out every single time I'm in the same place as you.
It's That's true. Sure. The same, and it is unfortunate. So the first thing we'll talk about is we were recording this on the 18th of December. Because of Tom York's illness, I was unable to make a reschedule coming to Copenhagen to see you and Radiohead, which would have been really like the greatest. But how was Radiohead?
I was lucky enough to go twice. So I saw them on 2 consecutive nights. The first week they played here. The first concert I went alone, which is always a very intense thing to do for me. So I went there. I had a standing floor ticket. I went there well in advance, was close to the stage, and I had a magical night watching the band, watching Tom York and all his antics. And then on second night, I went there with my wife, and it was up in the seated sections, and it was not as intense, but it was still great, and it was fantastic to get a whole different perspective on kind of the visuals and the whole setup. So and I don't know if you've seen the breakdown of their set list, but they have very much an A and B set list, so that
Yeah.
they so every day it's either the A or the B. So I was lucky enough to get both set lists. A definitely being my favorite, but yeah, but it was magical. And then this week we had the reschedules, and you were able to pick up tickets really inexpensively because the first two, the canceled shows had 34,000 people booked in, and I think 9,000 of them were internationals. So obviously a lot of them would have a hard time coming back 2 weeks
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, it was especially like the week before the Christmas. It made it really hard because everybody's like, at least in my case, my wife had some travel that butted up against like, and it's kind of there's no direct flight from DC to Copenhagen. So then it was like it stretched the day out, and it was just like I would be cutting it too close, and I was like going, what happens if I fly all that way and like I get jammed up all? It's like a 48-hour trip to go see you in radio. And I was like,
Yeah.
I can't screw it up. So, but did you see? And I know the answer because I've already asked you. But did you see your favorite song? And
I
do you
did
want to
see
tell
my
everybody what it is because it means a lot to you and it has a foundation in this conversation.
yeah. Well, coincidentally, my favorite song, which is called Weird Fishes, is on both the A and B set list. They play that every night. So I got to see it twice.
Perfect. And I don't know if I ever asked, but why is that your favorite song?
Um, well, looking back, I'd probably say that I've had many different favorite songs, but at some point I came across an 18-minute video on YouTube with a kind of guitar teacher who listens to the song and breaks it down. And I probably watched that breakdown of the song 10 times or 15 times. And every time I fall more in love with the song because it just, it blows his mind. And it's very infectious the way he breaks it down. And he
Yeah.
goes like, this is not supposed to work. They're not playing it like you would or should. And then he goes like, but it all makes magical sense. And I was like,
Yeah.
I fell in love with the song even more after seeing that. And I have a registered company which is now called Weird Fishes. So my personal consultancy company, if you will, is called Weird Fishes.
Yeah.
So,
See, I worked that in there, and it was like it was funny because like I was like, oh, what is my favorite? My favorite is myxomatosis
mhm.
because I'm chaotic, so
There you
not really,
go.
but all right. So anyway, so we talked about you have a consultancy now, and it's called Weird Fishes, and you're doing some entirely different stuff than you have in the past, which is always like a good time. Well, there's never a bad time to catch up with you, but this was a good time to do the podcast because I can't really let you and Eric get too far apart because then one of you will start thinking I favor the other one. So what are you up to?
So since the 1st of November, I've been working with a company called Culture Suite. Um, it is a European company that has been around for a long time, but is now growing significantly. And it's a company that does, well, to be simple, or to put it simply, it's websites as a service. So
Mhm.
it's a platform that's built for arts and culture. And the whole kind of website platform is built around the concepts that we use, like productions and events and workshops and educations and stories and blog posts and casts. And it's all kind of worked into a platform. So organizations will still have from the outside, completely unique website, but underneath it's running off a shared platform that allows organizations to kind of reap those benefits of a very advanced set of tools and integrations, so that they can yeah, they can get a very advanced website at the cost of a plain kind of typical what's on website. So
Yeah.
and I've joined and will be mainly focusing on launching it in the Nordics and in the German-speaking region. And and of course I come with a background of partnerships across the world, so I'll hopefully also be able to engage with a lot of them and position the platform as it should.
Yeah. So websites, right? And one of the things that I was interested about when we were talking about this before, when you were first getting ready to make the move, was a lot of people's websites are pretty static, and they probably they can feel a little dated. And I think the way that we were talking about it, and it felt like to me, was that people feel like their website is something that has to deteriorate. Like, it's like the peak is when it's fresh and brand new, and like
Uh-huh.
anytime you have to make it better, it's like you're recreating the thing from scratch. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case, right? I know it's not the case. Like if you're more comfortable using like some of these like off the shelf type things, like maybe I'm gonna just throw out some names. I don't even know if these are the right ones, but like Wix or WordPress or any of those things, and
Mhm.
you have a little more flexibility and the adaptability. The arts and culture have not necessarily had that advantage in the past, and so it's made the websites clunky, harder to use. The tech word being friction. Um, but what I gathered from like digging in the culture suite is that that's not necessarily the case. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I think it's a very different way of thinking about a website. I think the typical model would be just like you bought a car. You would buy a car, and the day you bought it, it was pristine, it was new, it was fresh, it was like best in class maybe.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then the the day after, it's one day old, and
Hmm.
6 months later, it's 6 months old, and it's starting to
Yeah.
show, and then you kind of, and then now you see with like Tesla, kind of brought that kind of whole
Yep.
concept of the updatable car. That was completely new to people. Now, I guess you would expect it from any electric vehicle, but that's a completely new way of seeing this. And I think the same thing has gone for websites historically. It's like something that you do, and then you let
Hmm.
it age, and then after 5 years you go like, oh, we need a new website because now we have all of these components that no longer work and are no longer supported, or there's been updates on, I don't know, how it's SEO or how it integrates
Hmm.
with your ticketing system or whatever that is. But with Culture Suite, it's the same approaches you would have it with any other as a service piece of software that you subscribe to. We have a new release every 3 weeks. So we're like 222 releases in. So it's a very mature product. And you can say, like, you don't, without any investment, you're still getting new features every 3 weeks. They may not be specifically aimed at you, but they'll be available to you. And it's driven, like that whole development is driven by the community, which is now, I don't know, 125 organizations, which means 160, 180 different websites. And as I said, you can't, from the outside, you can't see that this is not a unique website, but the infrastructure is shared. And that means that you can do very, very advanced things.
Well, let me ask you about this then from because I understand on the inside and the back end, it's I think the term people would be most comfortable with would be templated to a certain
Mhm.
extent, right? And I totally get that, and I know that that's like probably simplifying it a little much, but I think the what you're talking about though is like it still looks completely unique on the outside, and I think that's where a lot of people get they struggle because they don't, they oh my God, there's like certain organizations like you can tell exactly who built their website because it looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
how does that work, right? So that like it does give, because I know this is like a where people throw away a lot of brand equity is like, you know, they're constrained.
Absolutely. And I think my wife runs a web shop off Shopify. And when people hear about kind of a website platform, they go like, "Oh, is it now going to be like a Shopify shop where every shop is more or less the same? The colors might be a little bit different, but anyone can go in and say like, okay, this is a Shopify shop." Um, and the benefit of that is, you mentioned friction. You can say the benefit of a very templated e-commerce shop is that there's as little friction as possible. People will have done the checkout before. It might even recognize them and pre-fill some of the elements, and that's what Shopify does. Shopify creates the kind of the best purchase path through the website, optimizing it for transactions. Whereas a lot of these custom build websites that we've seen in arts and culture are more kind of, oh, we just want to be special and have our brand out there. But sometimes you're like, that's not necessarily to the
Yeah.
benefit of the customer, because they can't kind of find things, and it's not
Hmm.
it's not easy for the venue or the organization to update it. So you can say that, yeah, we will style every single component to the kind of the brand DNA of
Hmm.
the website, but the components are still components. So they are individually optimized to be accessible and to be like tested and functional.
Yeah.
Accessibility is a huge thing in Europe, and especially in the Nordics, where every government-funded organization has to adhere to all these requirements on accessibility. And for most organizations, that's not a really appealing investment, because it's a very small audience, but it's super important. And I think that's one of the benefits that you get with these kind of tried and tested components.
Yeah. So how hard, part of the thing I'm curious about is, like what people can do with their websites now, because I feel that if you're not careful, there's a lag in your ability to meet the demands of your customer. And I think that that's been a long-standing challenge for a lot of organizations. And partly it's because, again, it's been expensive and it's been timely to build things out. The technology is kind of in a lot of cases sometimes lagged, and it's not, it's totally functional technology, but it's not like people are always playing catch up. So like understanding some of the improvements in capability in the capacity for technology to meet people's needs. How long does it take for somebody to like build up a website, and what are some of the things that they can do now that they maybe have struggled to do in the past?
Interesting question. I think you can say historically, if you go out and you kind of commission a custom build, and you say like, okay, I want to have this and this design, I want to have a what's on page, and I want to have some static pages about the theater or the organization. I want to have and I want to have a connection probably to my ticketing system, so some of the information flows in
Hmm.
automatically, and I can, the buy ticket button goes red when the event is sold out. And that's kind of been, you know, just asking for that, that's $100,000 website.
Hmm.
And some of the more advanced things that you can do is you can connect it to your venue management system. So the non-ticketed events that are taking place at the venue will also flow in. You can connect the website to Google Ads and Facebook Ads, so you can have
Hmm.
automatically event information streaming to the ad platforms for remarketing. You can have logic of when an event is sold out, it stops being advertised, so you're not spending your marketing dollars. You can have, and this is where it becomes really interesting, you can have conditional content. So let's say you're a performing arts venue and you probably have this strategy of taking your audiences from like first timers to
Hmm.
repeat buyers to maybe members, donors, patrons, and kind of move them up that ladder. But if you have a standard website, anyone that goes on that website will see the same thing. So you're prompting your members to become members. You're prompting your donors to become donors. And with kind of this conditional content that draws on how your visitors or how your customers and constituents are tagged in your CRM, that
Hmm.
means that as soon as they come on the website, it's going to say like, hey, Dave, like, did you know that by upgrading your current membership to this next tier, you'll get these and these additional benefits? Or, hey, we can see that you've already been twice this year. So did you know that with a membership you would have saved so and so?
Yeah.
Like some of these things you can start working into it. And you can also do things like connect it to digital signage so that it'll automatically show up on the screens and like some of these capabilities that are typically really, really expensive. Um, those are some of the advantages that you can get from sharing a platform and tapping into these elements. And
Hmm.
I know that one of the things that you always talk about is kind of the data capture and how we're being specific in our communication. And I think most organizations will probably see ticketing and CRM and their email marketing platform and the digital ads, and they will try to segment and they'll try to be specific in their communications. But I think like most of the organizations I speak to, I see that they consider the website is not kind of necessarily part of that ecosystem. That's just a storefront. And it's like everyone who passes by that storefront will see exactly the same thing, and you're just putting up your content. And and I think that's if you go to websites that have a lot of content, like I'm a sucker for the New York Times cooking section. There's probably thousands of recipes in there, but they will recognize me and they'll go like, hey, if you're cooking for this kind of occasion, like here are some of the recipes, or you know, they'll offer me different ways in. Like, is this a weekday meal?
Yeah.
Is
Hmm.
this a holiday special feast? Like, and I'll call them ways in. And I think that's something that we need to also take into to website design and offering. There are different audiences, and they need a way in. Because we're very often kind of just expecting everyone to like figure it out.
Oh yeah, I am still, and you could probably see the expression on my face. I was kind of like, what, wait, what? That people just they see their website is not essential. It's just a storefront, and that explains a whole lot of things because um, I just can't imagine that like a performing arts, a culture section business would consider their website not an essential tool at this.
No, okay. Before before my inbox explodes, let me just say, I didn't say that they didn't think it was essential. They just don't see it as part of that audience development strategic toolbox where they can actually go and say like, okay, how do we bring people on kind of that audience journey that we want? How do we support that via the website? It is typically something that was done 2 years ago. It has a great what's on page, and that's about it. So I'm just saying it's not a
Yeah,
strategic
yeah, yeah.
day-to-day tool. So
It's probably I may have misheard it because I was like going, wait, hold on a second. But I still am still just as baffled by the not an audience development tool because but that's more on me because like to go back to how like my philosophy is I go everything matters, right? Like all of these touch points matter. And when you look at the website, it's like probably one of your better audience development tools. Because I think one of the lessons that hopefully people had an opportunity to take from COVID was that, you can create value for people as an arts and cultural organization, even when they're not in your building. And that's really like kind of the beauty of having a more flexible and adaptable website, is that it allows you to begin having those deeper, more personal, and not personalized, but personal conversations with people the first time they come in contact with you. Because the research I've done, which is loosely okay for this conversation, would be that, like, it can take you 11 or 12 touch points before somebody's ready to make a purchase. The thing about it is like, we don't always know when those touch points are happening, and so sometimes the website is a really, really great tool to help get to notch those 11 touch points. And so, like, what I find cool about the advances in websites, right, like, is that you have the ability to um, not recreate it entirely, but to create experiences and emotional connections that are specific to you in a way that you didn't before. Is that,
Yeah,
or am I,
and you
or am
can,
I just making stuff up?
no, I think that's absolutely correct. And you can give people a sense of the experience and a sense of the content. And I think that's very true. And I think many organizations probably know that, that they could improve, but for many it's, it's, it would be another project, and it would be have they would have to work with an outside agency. It would have to tap into marketing budgets. So there's a lot of kind of barriers to it, and I think that's why we accept that, it's easier to like redo some segmentation or set up a new digital ad or set up a specific email campaign. That's easier because we can set it up, we can do it in house. It doesn't have to involve us making new decisions or employing an agency that will come and work with us. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit of a stale tool in your toolbox. And I was recently at a conference where I found myself on a really interesting conversation. Um, there was a German professor who had done her PhD in why people are not buying tickets. And it was a really interesting. She really shone the light on this aspect that we maybe ignore a little bit. She was saying, like, we're so focused on the data that we capture on those that buy the tickets, and can we get the demographics, and kind of how can we enrich the data, and can we also get some data on how they interact with us in our emails and all that. But she said, like, but you have a big part of your audience, potential audience, who's not buying tickets. And she says, like, if you're 20 years old and you come onto an opera house website and all you see is a what's on page, and you go, like, all of these titles, they mean nothing to me. I'm just a little bit curious about opera, but I have no idea, like, where to start. What should I do? Or I'm trying to impress my girlfriend, so I wanted to buy us opera tickets, but I don't know which one. It's all very scary.
I
Like,
don't know where to
this one is a
start.
7-hour Wagner opera. That's probably not the best place to start. And she was the one that described these kind of ways in. Like, why don't we have a part of the website that's for, things to see with your girlfriend, things to see with your kids, things to
Mhm.
see on a date night, things to see with your parents.
What to know
And
if you don't know anything?
exactly, like
Yeah.
we expect a lot from website visitors.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're I think this. professor and I we would have a nice conversation because you know that have talked about this. It's like, well, what are your non-customers doing, right? And it's she probably has data, whereas I'm just going like, look, I just look at the reality, which is like, hey, look, if you're performing an opera, maybe half a percent of the population of your region buys like from you in any given year, and then you have another like segment of tourists, whatever percentage that is. What would happen if you doubled the number of people who bought just once from in your area? Like what would happen, as opposed to trying to get this small group of people to buy again, because that's harder to do. It's easier to get somebody to buy once than it is to get them to expand from like buying, 5 to 6. And it's and I know the research on this, but the practicality is that like everybody approaches it like it's easier to get somebody to go from, if you have a subscription to the opera, right? And there's 4 operas a year. You're not adding a fifth opera, so then like what more is there to do? So you have to get more people, right? If you have somebody, we'll use a sports example because this is one pretty common, right? Is like if you have a 10-game package to the Nationals, because I'm in DC and Copenhagen doesn't have a baseball team. Um, it's probably kind of hard to get somebody to go from 10 to 12 games because 10's already a huge commitment of time. But what happens if you got 1% of the population, it's 6 million people in DC, in the DC area approximately. If you can add like just 1%, not even a tenth of a percent, that'd be 60,000 more people. That's like, so like, yeah, you got to look at these things like you're expecting too much. And what you got to do is you need to open the door, ways in. I think it's like a really, really great way to approach it.
Yes, and it was really interesting. She'd done a lot of interviews, as you say, like, yes, she had all the data.
Hmm.
And as you say, like, if you're if you're a parent and you have an autistic child, like a what's on a generic what's on page can be scary because it's like, well, is any of this suitable for seeing with my autistic child? And those are like, you can say, well, there's not a million families with autistic children in Washington, but it's a very specific market. And
Hmm.
by offering them like, here's a way to see like these are the 4 events coming up in the next 2 months that would be suitable for that. And you go like, that means that you attract a very specific audience because they find it easier to buy their
Hmm.
tickets with you rather than the theater next door.
I was gonna say, and the thing about it is like if you're trying to attract the new group of people, and you make it known, like just make it obvious that like I want you to come here, and you're going to attract that audience because most people aren't thinking that way. It's in a world full of noise, in a world full of like since we're talking about websites so much, cookie cutter websites that
Mhm.
that kind of feel static and very much like Me Too in the way that they're put together. Uh, Doing things that are specific to the people you want to attract can make all the difference in the world, right? It's fine margins that will make a huge amount of change. And
Yeah,
what you're telling me is that like it's a lot easier to do that now with the tools that we have available.
absolutely. It's again, I would love for the industry to be a little bit more kind of methodical in this. Like, if you set up a new component on the website, you should track it. Like, you should make sure that if people click on that and then end up buying a ticket, you should kind of attribute that back to the new component that you set up. Um, I was on the National Theater, the National Opera in Berlin website yesterday, and they had like these amazing blogs of like there was one for busy people. So this was for experiences lasting less than 2 hours. They had for people who are enthusiastic about stage design. Then they had like, then you should go and see these productions. They are sure to delight fans of
Mhm.
impressive visuals. They had like for romantics, the most moving love stories. And I go like, that's a way to kind of tap into what's the motivation for you, like
Hmm.
what's driving that you want to go and see something, instead of just going like, here is like opera A, here's opera B, here's opera C, take your pick. Like
Hmm.
we're making it easy for you.
Yeah.
And that's where I go like, that's removing friction, that's drawing people in, and that is ultimately selling tickets.
Well, it goes back to the thing you talked about earlier with the segmentation, which is, something again that that being methodical thing. That's sort of my stock in trade. But what's interesting is you were talking about the segmentation in the way like, oh, people do it or don't do it. And I think the important thing for people to consider, which you just brought up, was like what behavior is what's driving the behavior, not what's behavior, what is driving the behavior, right? Um, it could be fear of the unknown. So then you have like some really like more popular performances,
Yeah.
or you use pop culture as a way in. It could be people like you said, stage design, people who are into these things. There you go. Um, like I use an example of when I worked in New York and I was selling, like it was kind of concierge type things and selling Yankees Red Sox tickets and understanding what the person was buying and that they were trying to open a new business relationship, and all of these things these are what are driving behaviors. And number one, they will make people take action if you know them, right? And either your website should be able to help facilitate that or at least guide people towards the right answer to this. But they'll also help people spend more money. And they're likely, if people feel seen and they enjoy themselves, they'll come back. And those are all positives that people
Yep.
can have.
Yeah, and I think now, because you could probably go back to the first podcast conversation that we had, and we would probably be talking about like audience data and understanding, like profiling people, and making sure that you understand kind of what purchases they've done and where they come from, and I think the industry has come a long way in terms of customer data and
Mm-hmm.
like segmentation, and like tagging up their customers, and saying like, okay, this is a person who buys very close to the event, likes to go to like the big events, buys for this and this kind of price group.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of understand a lot about our customers, and that hopefully kind of goes into email marketing and goes into digital marketing. But for most organizations, it's not possible to push kind of all that knowledge into the website experience as well, because
Mm-hmm.
there's simply a technology gap
Yeah.
that's blocking that. And that's what I'm seeing now. That is a huge potential for organizations to drive revenue, really.
Yeah. I think you're right. I know we probably have talked about audience data and where customers are coming from in this whole deal probably every time. And I think what I wanted for people to take away from our conversation today is that I want to try to work as hard as I can to help make things seem easier to people because I think some of the reluctance and some of the challenge of change for people is that a lot of times when they're talking to people who are providing a solution or talking about upgrading technology, even rethinking their marketing strategy, is it seems complicated, right? And then and everybody's pulled in so many different directions, and I think what I learned from you today, is about the tools are there to make things happen more easily. One of the things I have been trying to do is like trying to make sure that like I can understand, like I explain things in a way that like here's the outcome, here's why this thing matters. Because I want things people are challenged, right? Like there's so many solutions, there's so many opportunities. The market for what everybody's selling is competitive, and I just want to make it easy for people to create positive change, not just change for change's sake, but positive change. So, like you're saying here with the websites, it's like it's easier to present a path for people and for them to like meet people where they are, ways in, which I think is like a really great like way of describing it. Making it so that like you can reduce the friction, right? Because again, if the first time you ever been to an opera thing and like all these things with the what's on thing, and you don't know a way in, that's friction because that's just and it's probably a barrier too far. It's and I think it's a really really cool way to think through like between like how can I make it simple? How can I invite people in ways into this? And then what do I need to know to provide a better experience for people? And I think like to me at least it seems like the tools are available now to make that happen.
Absolutely, and I think that goes even beyond websites. I think it's an interesting time in live entertainment and the arts. There are so many good tools out there, and they're really kind of reaching a point where they're tried and tested, and you can. I mean, most organizations can go and pick some new tools off the shelf, and they will. There's a very very big chance that they will work positively for them and create that positive change that you describe, whether that's in kind of the visitor experience or whether that's driving new revenue. There are these things out there, and I think that's where maybe like 5, 10 years ago it was a little bit more experimental. They kind of had to
Hmm.
take a chance, and they had to have a lot of um, a lot of competency in house, and they had to kind of drive these things themselves. I think now the technology side of live entertainment is really maturing, and I think that a lot of good tools are out there. And and then we'll probably see over the like there's going to be a great big sprinkle of AI on every single one of them, and we'll start seeing how that really changes dynamics as well. From kind of the website side of things, we've recently started working with an AI chatbot company where we feed automatically all the event information and visitor information into that chatbot so that it can provide um, a better experience for those on the website that wants to have a chatbot interaction. We are we recently partnered with a company that clones websites for translations. So if you're a major opera house and you have a lot of tourists flying in and you want to
Hmm.
offer them, a website in their native language, like that was probably historically that was just impossible. Like you would have to describe every single opera performance in 4 different languages,
Hmm.
and you just didn't have the manpower for that. But now you do the English version, and then it automatically translates to French, Spanish, and German. And that again means that it's a lot easier for tourists to interact with your websites, come onto the website and find their way through. Um, and I think that's where we're seeing some real change from some of these technologies coming into this to the space.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the AI thing because I don't want to open the door too far because I know it's a conversation that like probably A, I've had several of those already on here, but B, it take away from the simplicity because I think it's a topic that's probably overwhelming for people. I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, the most important thing for people to know at the moment with AI is that the context of what you're hoping to achieve matters because it can add to your ability to create these experiences to better understand your customers. But if you don't feel comfortable, it needs to fit into what you're trying to do. So make sure it works for you, not just doing it because you feel like, and I'm using the quotes, air quotes, everybody is doing it. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's you can break it down and say like how are people using it in their everyday work life, but then you can also say like how is it coming into these tools on kind of an organizational level, and if you go all the way, you can also talk about kind of how is this changing our industry over time. Some will go and say like, well, if you run, again, we can go back to the Shopify ecom and say, well, ChatGPT invested in a very deep integration with Shopify so that you can actually do your purchases from within a chat interface. So you can say that means that potentially you'll never see the website because you'll just have a conversation in ChatGPT about an opera. I want to see an opera in Washington. What are the options? And then it'll present the options and you go like, oh, can you get me some nice tickets, second highest price tier? And it'll go like, check, I've done that. Here are your tickets. You were never on a website, but all of that still requires a lot of data flowing from kind of your CMS and into your website, but also into the LLMs and the chats. And I think that's going to be a massive change. Like, where are tickets bought? And you spoke about technology lag. I can say, well, ChatGPT did this with, or OpenAI did this with Shopify. It's going to be a long wait until they do that on a performing arts ticketing system. But it's where we're headed. That's for sure.
Yeah. And the big key is, like, at least for me, is like, make sure that it fits into what you're trying to do, and like, don't, and I think I frame the question that way because I don't want people, again, I wanted to be overwhelmed by it, because I think that's, there's so many ideas and so many tools and there's so much stuff going on around it. It's like it's like all the other tools, they can become overwhelming. And I think the important thing is to make sure it fits into the context of what you're doing, which, again, the technology is available, but you may not be able to have the same AI capability that Shopify has yet. But that's okay. We'll get you there. That's right.
Yeah.
We will get you.
And then if I can be a little bit provocative and you say, like, if that's the situation right now, how do you end up with a decision to go and build a custom website for yourself? Like, that for me is like, if there's so much uncertainty, things are going to change massively over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. How does that fit with a strategic decision to go and custom build something where you know that you're going to be alone? Like, you're going to have, costs and costs and costs to keep your website updated to this technology change.
Yeah.
But
is it in your core competencies? And I'm going to guess that probably not. And I think that like, the nice thing about a lot of the tools that are available to people now is that, like, it allows you to do what you do best. So I would tell people to take advantage of, investigate tools like Culture Suite, and some of the many other ones, because it gives you a chance to get back to doing the things that you can do better than anybody else. So Martin, where do people find you now on the internet? Because now we got whole new places to find Martin besides the Talking Tickets Slack channel.
I haven't actually gone into ChatGPT and asked what would come up if you asked ChatGPT where to find Martin Gammeltoft. But
we should do that.
I'm obviously on LinkedIn, and that would be a good place to find me. Feel free to reach out to my Culture Suite email as well. I think on the Culture Suite website, there's probably a link into a page where you can find me. There's also a ton of good content on that website. So if you feel interested now in kind of what's going on with websites, then that's a good place to find some more.
And I'll put a link to the Culture Suite Martin page in the show notes because I'm good like that. I am a technologically savvy. Martin, man, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure as always.
Let me know what you thought about this conversation I had with Martin by sending me an email to my name, dave@davewakeman.com. Check out the website, davewakeman.com, and get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. Also, in the show notes, there's a link to our Slack channel. There's approaching 400 people, depending on when you listen to this and what's going on. I have no idea. I lose sight of these things. But it's very exciting. I'm working hard to get some more action out into the general channel and less in my DMs. So help me out by coming and joining us, talking it up, sharing your ideas, your thoughts. It's a great community of folks. So do that. You've made it to 50 minutes here on the podcast. So thank you for spending so much time with me. But do me a favor, rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. And if you know somebody, a friend, coworker, colleague that would benefit from conversations like this one with Martin, recent ones with Josh Litwack and Lissa Harris Swazo, do me a favor and share it. Helps the podcast grow, helps me keep getting great guests, positive encouragement that, I'm a sucker for. All of those things are in play. So do me that favor. And as I say every time, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, I'll talk to you soon, but take it easy.